Hello and welcome back to And That's a Fact, the channel where we take our subjective opinions and turn them into definitive, objective fact. I'm
right.
Neil Adamson.
And I'm Rick Papandrea.
And today we continue our first round. This is our last video going through our first round, and this time we will be going to be exploring the MCU bracket. I know you guys have all been waiting for this one.
I've been looking forward to this one a lot.
This one we waited to do last because we wanted to make sure, we talked about it in the preview video, we wanted to make sure that the Avengers
Infinity War?
I almost said Age of Ultron.
It's 2 years ago.
The Infinity War Rotten Tomatoes score held so that we knew that our seeding and our matchups were going to be correct. Which, if they weren't, it would have caused a lot of problems, but at least... but it held
with our
out
voting.
As we expected. It stayed at 84%, so its seeding spot at, I believe, at number 10.
Yes.
Held.
Which, 84%, and it's the 10th. That's the 10th highest percentage. This is a really strong bracket.
Yes, unlike the DC bracket, which we did a couple days ago, this one is very different, where even in our first round, every single film in here is going to be over 70%, whereas in the DC bracket...
there was a much wider range.
Yeah, now that we're into the second round with that, everything's kind of evened out, as we talked about before, but this one, it started out very tough.
Yeah, and just as a reminder, you guys are voting on these, and so you're deciding. Neil knows the results, and I do not, so I'm going to be finding out with you guys who won, and, for the next round, get out there and vote. We'll say that again, but we're going to start with it, too.
Yes, absolutely. So we're going to jump into our first match of our MCU bracket, and that was the number 1 seed, Black Panther, versus the number 16 seed, Age of Ultron.
To me, this is the only one in this whole bracket where I'm like, oh, easy. And that's easy, Black Panther wins. I don't think that Black Panther deserves the 1 seed, if I'm being honest. I think it's good. I put it more in the middle of the pack, and we could talk more about Black Panther later. But I'm guessing it easily beats Age of Ultron, which is pretty easily the weakest on here, I'd say, that made it, of the top 16. If you'll notice, Iron Man 2 did not make it. I think that
Thor
makes
Dark
sense.
Worlds didn't make it, and The Incredible Hulk did not make it.
And I love Dark World, and it has some flaws certainly, but I really like it. But that said, of these top 16, I think Age of Ultron deserves to be in the 16th position. Not because it's bad, just because it's fine. So I think that Black Panther pretty easily will move on, especially because it's so recent.
See, I never understood the intense hatred. I wouldn't say hatred, but
I don't understand intense hatred for it either.
Like, to me, Age of Ultron is a perfectly fine film, and in fact, I think it's absolutely necessary in terms of the serialized MCU.
Necessary in terms of the fallout of Sokovia and the ripples that it's had through the rest of the series?
Yes, but also character-wise. I felt that the first Avengers film did a really good job of just giving us exactly what we needed to understand that film for each of those characters.
Sure.
But with Age of Ultron, I feel like what it gives us with each character, some people may say that it feels like, oh, we already know that already, but I think it goes a lot deeper, and I think that what we learn about all the characters is totally necessary going forward into each of their other solo films and into Infinity Wars. So, when people are asking me, because I have a lot of friends who don't like the Marvel films, and Infinity War is such a huge thing that people who don't usually watch these movies are interested in it, but they feel like, oh, I can't watch that unless I've seen these others. And so I have friends who are now asking, what films should I watch if I want to see Infinity War? And I know a lot of people would leave Age of Ultron off of a slim list of just a few. But to me, like, that is absolutely necessary to go into Infinity War,
I agree with that.
understanding these characters' motivations.
Yeah, because, I mean, especially if you look at it as Avengers movies, you watch the first Avengers, then Age of Ultron, and then Infinity War, that makes perfect sense. And I love the character stuff in Age of Ultron. The sequence around the coffee table where they're all trying to pick up hammers is maybe one of my favorite scenes in the whole MCU, and it's just these people hanging out, having fun. And, like, I would watch a 2-hour movie of that scene. I would watch a real-time dinner sequence. And to me, the Age of Ultron fails in its conclusion, in my opinion. And it's that, you know, the first Avengers movie, it did a big army versus the Avengers. But where it succeeded was that they all had very specific jobs. And, like, Cap calls it out. You do the perimeter. You call out their troop movements. You defend this area. And so it was a big fight, but it was really smaller fights within a big fight. Age of Ultron,
it was
kind
more
of turns
strategic.
And
Age of Ultron feels a lot more just random.
Yes,
but
especially that sequence in the church where, like, it's just kind of haphazard and you can't track what's going on. That's where Age of Ultron doesn't succeed, in my opinion.
See, and to me, I saw it as we already got the first Avengers, and we got that whole thing with those OG Avengers. And to me, the Battle of Sokovia was less about let's do that again. Let's focus on that same strategy of this original group, and it was more about how do these new characters who literally just started, helping them out with Wanda.
You walk out that door, you're an Avenger. Yeah. I liked that scene a lot. There's a lot in that movie that I liked.
Yeah, it was about how do they fit into this whole battle sequence. And so, I mean, there's a lot of things concerning that battle that we can split hairs over, like what we liked, what we didn't like. But I think overall, Ultron is so massively important to understand the characters of, like, I think for one, Tony Stark, like, more than anything. But also, like, the first Thor movie was one of the films that not a lot of people have seen. And that scene with the coffee table talking about Thor's hammer, it was basically like, all right, everything you needed to know about the first Thor movie was in that one scene. And the way that they did that, and then they called back to it later with Vision.
And that was an accident. They wrote that scene, and then later they were like, okay, we need a way to prove that Vision is worthy, and, like, what if he picks up the hammer? And they didn't write that scene so that you understand the later. They came up with the hammer scene, or the Vision hammer scene later, and so setting it up like that and then paying it off, it works so well. There's so much about this movie that I really do like, and I think it's just one of those where because it's fine, it might even be good, but because it's not really good, in this bracket, it doesn't rise to the top.
Well,
you know what
I think people's biggest problem with Age of Ultron is that people generally feel like, all right, we've seen this before. Like, it doesn't take, in a lot of people's minds, it doesn't take us to a new place and test our characters in new ways. It's testing them in similar ways that they've already been tested. But I think that it's really important to do that because sometimes we learn the most not from going through one situation and then we move on, but having to go through that same situation over and over and over again. What do we take out of it differently? How do we approach it differently the next time around? How do the relationships change? Do the relationships change, or do people become more fortified? That is all informing us about who these characters are, what their motivations are, and I think that is an incredibly strong part of this film, and to me, why I have it ranked in all of my MCU films a lot higher than most people. And honestly, I actually have Black Panther and Age of Ultron in my rankings, like, right next to one another.
Sure. Yeah, I would put it closer to the middle of the pack probably. But again, these are all such good movies that one of them needs to be 16. And
yes.
Yeah, there's a lot in there that I really like. Like, there's the Cap's line, we're not all coming back from this. I've got no plans tomorrow. I love Cap. I mean, I love Cap. So there's a lot in there in that movie that I like. Personally, I'll probably watch Age of Ultron again before I watch Black Panther again. But that's just because I've seen Black Panther more recently. You know what's weird about Age of Ultron that I didn't like, that did kind of bother me? Was Ultron's mouth. Like, he didn't need a mouth that moved. You know what it should have been? This is like what I would have done.
It should have been a facial slit, like Tony Stark.
It should have been a hole that's like basically a speaker, but it could have like the light. It could have had a light that like lit up as he spoke.
Like
and
the
that
original C-3PO concept design, where it was just like a circle with a speaker.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, a little bit. Something like, it could have been cool and awesome looking and not had lips, because that really was weird for me.
And talking about Black Panther versus Age of Ultron,
yeah,
one of the biggest things that people would be quick to point out between these two films is the villains. Because Ultron, a lot of people do not like the villain. Not that they don't like James Spader or that they don't like the idea of Ultron from the comics, but they don't like how it was realized. They don't think that it was a big challenge. Like it's just not new. It's not exciting, and it's not a person, right?
Right.
So I think that creates an inherent challenge in itself, but. Black Panther, you had Killmonger, who most people regard, up until maybe Thanos, most people regard, and Loki, as the best MCU villain that they've had.
He's certainly one of the most interesting MCU villains, Killmonger is. One of my complaints about Black Panther, though, is about Killmonger, not as a character, but as it's another
as
MCU movie.
Yes.
Where the climax is the superhero fighting someone with the same powers as him.
Yeah.
And, like, that's not bad inherently, but we've seen it a lot. We saw it in the first Iron Man, and we're like, all right, this is awesome. This is Iron Man. We love this, because we hadn't seen it as many times. But then, more lately, we saw it.
Doctor Strange, Ant-Man.
Ant-Man is a really pretty serious offender of fighting someone with the same powers as you. And then Black Panther again. It's not only the same powers, it's the same suit, also made by his sister. It's like, so I like the character of Killmonger and like the philosophies that they talk about, but the kind of the third act of Black Panther falls flat for me a little bit.
Yeah, and I think we can get a lot more into Black Panther next week, because Black Panther will be moving on. It scored 80% of the vote in this match. That doesn't
surprise me.
Which I kind of assumed was going to happen, and really when you put these two, I said that for me they're ranked right by one another, but Black Panther is the spot above in my ranking. So if I have to choose, like, I'm going to choose Black Panther to go to the next round. But it does make me sad that Age of Ultron gets left behind, even though I know most people, are going to choose that way. So Black Panther moves on, and we jump into our next match, which is the number 8 seed Doctor Strange against the number 9 seed Captain America, the Winter Soldier.
It is amazing to me that that's the 9th seed. To me, Winter Soldier is one of, if not the best movies in the MCU, in terms of everything about it. We have the opening sequence on the boat, and I forgot the name of the boat, but just Cap. Absolutely, they've developed their fighing style for him. It's very different. The
Lumerian star. I was like, it was on the tip of my tongue.
I'm sorry, that's exactly what
I just had to say it because it's like right there.
And that's one of those movies where there are not a lot of movies where I walk away from that and say I would not change anything. I don't think that there is a single thing in Winter Soldier that I would change. Every part of it is so good.
Yeah. To me, a lot of people that I know who I think it's so strange to me that Winter Soldier is a number 9 seed.
Yeah.
Because most people I know who aren't big Marvel movie people choose this film as the best one. I think part of that is that it doesn't fall into a cookie cutter of what a comic book movie or what a Marvel comic book movie is. it breaks out of that a little bit more than the films before it, because it becomes more of a spy thriller type of movie. But I do think one of the things that maybe has hurt it and why it's at a number 9 seed is the fact that you still do need a pretty good amount of knowledge about this universe and about these characters to go into this film and to understand it.
Yeah. But this is one of the things that, to my mind, is so great about it, because yesterday we were talking about, or the other day we were talking about in DC, with Superman, you give him interesting fights by giving him a fight that he can't punch. In Winter Soldier, this is not a situation where Cap can just punch the bad guy.
Punch his way out of it, yeah.
Because first of all, the bad guy is his best friend. But on a grander scale...
this is a side note, a slight tangent, but I think this is why a Hulk movie, why Hulk movies are so hard to do, on their own, because you just said, with any good comic book movie, you want to give the villain, or you want to give the hero a fight that they can't punch their way out of. And so with a good Hulk movie, you would want to be doing that. But the thing that attracts most people to Hulk is the hulking aspect of him and him just literally punching his way out of situations. Right. So it's like we want the best of both worlds and we can't have it. You know what I mean? But anyways, go on.
Tangent aside, going back to Winter Soldier, so Cap can't punch his way out of this. He needs help. He needs to use subterfuge, which is not a skill he has, because he's a super soldier. He is a soldier. He's not a spy. Yep. So he has to learn these things. And not only that, but we were talking about how the way to make a lawful good character interesting is to put them in a situation where everything shouts compromise. Yep. And to not compromise.
Yep.
And he says, even when Nick Fury is on board with the helicarrier, he says, oh yeah, this is going to stop a lot of, this is going to be super helpful. He says, no, this is wrong. Yeah, we're going to stop a lot of threats before they happen. I thought the punishment usually followed the crime.
Yeah.
This is wrong. It doesn't matter that ultimately people might be safer. There is no greater good. This is an invasion of civil liberty. I can talk. Civil liberties. and it's wrong. And Cap doesn't, there's a moment in the comics, and I don't remember which one, but some senator wanted Cap to help him cover something up. And Cap is like, I am loyal to only one ideal, and that is liberty. The dream of America. And he doesn't care who's in power, and he doesn't care what they think is right. Cap knows what he believes is right and will do that. And if it means dying, he's so fine with that.
And obviously, Iron Man and Captain America are the two, poster boys. They're the two poster boys for the MCU, really. Yeah. And it's going to be shifting a little bit now, but I think they're the two poster boys. They have been for a long time. And you look at the Iron Man trilogy versus the Captain America trilogy, the difference is they kept putting Tony Stark in the same situations, and just questioning his motivation with the same situations. With Captain America, in each subsequent film in that trilogy, they put him in a new, different situation that was new to the audience. It was a completely different kind of thing going on, but it was still testing his motivation in the same way. Right. And I think the Iron Man trilogy to me actually works because what I said earlier talking about Age of Ultron, it's saying, hey, we're throwing the same problem at you again. Are you really that insane that you're going to approach it in the same way? Yes, he is. That's right. Crucial to understanding his character. Whereas with Steve Rogers, they're throwing a different situation, which makes it more interesting. But again, it's the same thing where he's going to approach it the same way. He's going to not compromise. He's going to have the same motivation in all of this.
And they're coming at it like Steve Rogers is here and Stark is here. And the first one, it's your actions have consequences. Are you going to take responsibility? And he does. And he just sort of keeps realizing that he has this responsibility and adapting to that. Steve Rogers' motivation isn't, I have a responsibility. He's always thought he had a responsibility. It's, I have a responsibility not to others, but to myself, to do what I believe is right. Yeah. And so,
I would argue that what you said about Tony Stark's, motivation, like your actions have consequences. I would say that is that's too, like, it's not deep enough to look at what his actual motivation is, because
sure, but I didn't want to take another 40 minutes to dive into just Tony Stark.
But we can get into the Iron Man stuff in the Iron Man movies, but right now let's talk about Doctor Strange really quick, because it's an 18. It is ranked higher
seed
than Winter
and
Soldier.
I've been talking like I assumed Winter Soldier is going to win, and I still think it will. I like Doctor Strange a lot. I love Benedict Cumberbatch. He's one of my favorite actors. There's a lot in there that I liked. I liked that the ending came down like not to a punch match. I love watching stunt choreography. Like, I love fight scenes. But it's also really interesting to switch it up. And I love that the way that he thought his way out of the conflict with Dormammu, and that he was just, you can't win. No, but I can die again and again and again forever. And that was really interesting to me. I really liked that.
Well, I think the key things, the pros to Doctor Strange is Marvel took a risk, and it was a pretty big risk in bringing this character in, because that was a really hard thing to do.
Until this point, there really hadn't been magic, and here they're like, magic exists,
and they did it in a very risky way, in a very fantastic way, and I think that is what makes this movie good. What makes this movie not so good is the fact that we feel like we've seen it before in Iron Man, in the first Iron Man film, because his character, Stephen
really
Strange,
similar arcs,
very similar.
And facial hair, like.
And not only that, but I feel like Stephen Strange and the way that Cumberbatch created him and portrayed him, he's a lot less endearing than Tony Stark. Like, they're both kind of cocky, arrogant assholes, but to most people, Robert Downey Jr. playing Tony Stark, it's he's an asshole, but he's a fun asshole.
But I like
it's
him
fun to watch him. But Stephen Strange, it's screw this asshole. You end up feeling a lot like, is it Rachel McAdams?
Yeah, bear with me as I speculate, because perhaps I think that Robert Downey Jr. is very much that kind of Tony Starkian ass, where we love him, and his confidence and aggrandizing style is part of the reason we love him. Benedict Cumberbatch is so the opposite. I think he's a great actor, but I think that doesn't come naturally to him. That he can't do that, I'm the greatest thing ever. So he went
a little too far, and
he can't, because when you say something like, I'm the greatest surgeon of all time, you've got to give just a little bit of a wink. That you're being big-headed and kind of a jerk, so that either the audience or just the people around you is like, oh, he's messing with us. And
or not that he's messing, but that he can have fun with himself. And Stephen Strange is not a character who pretty much through this whole film, he can't really have fun with himself. And I think very much at the end he starts getting there. Yeah. And in Infinity War he still gets there.
Yes.
But I think even still, I think what makes Infinity War great is the relationship between these two characters, who are both arrogant guys who think that they're the greatest, but one of them is sure of it, and that's Stephen Strange, and the other one is much more jovial about it, and that's Tony Stark. And I think that when you put those two together, you get something really cool. But just 100% the one that's sure about it on his own, not as interesting.
And the interesting thing is, you say that you think Strange is sure he's the greatest. I would say that Tony is sure that he's the greatest. But that's why he can undercut himself. Stephen Strange,
he's so sure that he doesn't care about what other people think.
Right. Yeah. Stephen Strange feels more of a need to prove himself to everyone else, which is why he's more abrasive as a personality.
Although I will say that what I just said, I'm going to contradict eventually. I'm saying it right now in terms of something other than motivation. I'm saying it more in just character attitude. Yeah, just in general. But,
anyway, I liked Doctor Strange. There's a lot in there that I thought was really interesting. I loved all the aesthetic. I liked the ancient one and how they worked a lot of Celtic knots and symbols into her magic and what she did. But I think that Winter Soldier is one of the best movies in the MCU, and so that I think it deserves to take it.
Yeah, and Winter Soldier does 77%. So Winter Soldier will be moving on to face Black Panther. in the
And now,
next round.
who do you think wins that one?
See, that one's so tough to me because Winter Soldier is much higher on my list than Black
I think
Panther.
Winter Soldier is better.
I
think
give
Winter
it to
Soldier
Winter
deserves
Soldier every day of the week.
Yeah,
But
he's not exaggerating.
Black Panther has a huge following.
Yeah.
Like there's a lot of people that love that movie for what it did in multiple areas, not the least of which what we talked about earlier with Killmonger. Like, hey, this is a villain that's actually a good villain, like for Marvel. So
but Winter Soldier is also, I mean, Buck, the Winter Soldier, the character, I think is also a really good villain.
but
So
but he's more of a tool of the
Hydra,
the
of the true
antagonist,
villain.
yeah.
But just like the brainwashed best friend, that's interesting to me. I'm into it. I think that Winter Soldier is better. I'm gonna vote for Winter Soldier. I hope it wins. I won't be surprised if it doesn't. But I will be sad.
Well, we'll have to see. I will be sad if Winter Soldier doesn't move on. But like we said, going into the second round, there's going to be a lot of really tough matches in this bracket. So anything that moves on after the second round, you can pretty much agree that even if you don't want it there, you'd have something else there. Like you can agree that it maybe deserves that. Spot.
Yeah. Even if it's not what you choose, it's still every movie on this list is so good. Yeah.
I think once we get down to the final four, that's when it's going to be like some people are going to be like, nope, that should not be the best one in this bracket.
Right.
But
yeah,
we'll see. I think some of the other bracket, like the DC and the non-MCU Marvel, those ones, I think people pretty much are all going to agree, like Logan and Dark Knight. But this one's a lot more. This one's a lot tougher. So we're going to jump into our next match. We got, like we said, we have a lot to say about these MCU films. So try to.
These are I mean, at least personally, if I'm going to choose one bracket, this is my favorite bracket. Of all of these four quadrants, this is my favorite. So I have a lot more opinions about all of these movies than I do about all the other movies we've talked about.
Well, jumping in, our next match is Spider-Man Homecoming, the 5 seed, up against Ant-Man as a 12 seed.
This one, again, is pretty easy for me, actually. I mean, I liked Ant-Man a lot. I liked the heist and comedy elements. It loses points, though, just because, again, it's the kind of the third act is the same, is the two guys in the same suit fighting, and I'm like, it's cool, it's fine. I liked it, it's good even. I'd give it a B, but I would give Spider-Man Homecoming an A. Spider-Man Homecoming did what the other two Spider-Man movies kind of, it shot the middle of what the other two Spider-Man franchises did. It has it's earnest, it's funny, Spider-Man helping an old lady and stopping a bike thief, that's Spider-Man, and I think they did it so well, and there's a lot about that movie that works.
The biggest thing with that character is if you capture the young and innocent side of him, where he's not jaded, where he's just excited.
He's so excited to be there. Hey, I'm Spider-Man.
Yeah, that is so crucial. And I think that Tom Holland is the perfect Spider-Man.
Because he's, as a person, not jaded and so excited to be there. It just overflows in his character.
To the point where he will spoil everything if you let him. But Ant-Man,
he literally spoiled Infinity War in an interview.
Ant-Man is a film that the first few times I saw it, I was like, yeah, that's really good. That's really good. And on each subsequent viewing, I'm like, no, not as good, not as good. And I think, to me, the biggest thing is anytime Cross is on the screen, the villain, I totally tune out. I have no interest in him as a character whatsoever. I think that the actor's portrayal of him is
I kind of like his portrayal. He's got some moments where he's just
nose. It's too on the nose to me. I really don't care.
He leans into the arch aspect of that character.
I really, really don't care. Now, the stuff with Michael Pena, I love it. He is absolutely
he's
hilarious.
Awesome, and I love the interplay between Scott and Hope. Just show me how to punch. Okay, just right in the nose. That kind of humor really works for me, and I really liked it.
But I see. This is the thing: is like, in terms of the characters that I liked, like I liked Scott Lang, and like Hope. She was okay, but like I felt like she put so much of a shell over herself, like as a character, like that's what she does. That like I never really got interested in her.
Sure, I think that will change in this next movie, which comes out in like a month. Which I think looks pretty good.
Yeah. So to me, Ant-Man represents Marvel wanting to go a different direction. Now there were, with doing a heist film. And they do a lot of that well. But you fire Edgar Wright, you put Peyton Reed doing a film that he didn't write the script for, then the studio is interfering in certain things, which I think this is probably... We talk about studio interference a lot. Marvel usually doesn't do it. I think on Marvel's... Well, they do it, but I don't think we hear about it.
They're good about it. I think that when Marvel, when the studio... Because Kevin Feige is... People say, oh, who do you look up to in Hollywood? Kevin Feige is the first name on my list. And people are like, who's that? Kevin Feige is the head of Marvel Studios, and he is the architect of the whole MCU, and he knows what he's talking. And there was issues between the studio and Joss on Avengers: Age of Ultron. There was issues between the studio and Edgar Wright on Ant-Man. But for the most part, I think that Marvel Studios they know exactly what they want. And so when they come into conflict with a director, it's because the director isn't doing what the studio wants. It's not because the studio doesn't know what they want, which is, I think, a lot of times with other things.
Well, and
other studios.
And then the other thing is they are usually pretty good about resolving those conflicts.
Yes.
And
not letting them leak to the public.
In this case, they weren't.
Yeah.
This was very public about what happened, and this one, I think, shows up on screen. And so to me, there's a lot of things about Ant-Man that cause it to drop. It makes sense that it's a 12 seed to me.
Yeah,
I think that the humor in it is what keeps it afloat in most people's minds. And when I think about it, I still do think about it in a good way because of the humor. But then when I actually sit down and watch it, I'm like,
It's funny. Like, Baskin Robbins always finds out. That's a funny line. I can't like, see? But... but that doesn't mean the movie is good necessarily.
Yeah. So Spider-Man: Homecoming is the clear, deserving winner of this match, and they do win with 59% of the vote. So Spider-Man: Homecoming.
That's the closest one so far.
Yeah, it is. I think we might have one that's closer, but Spider-Man: Homecoming will be moving on. I expected this, and I am happy about this, but it will be moving on to face the winner of The Avengers versus Iron Man 3. The Avengers is a 4 seed and Iron Man 3 is a 13 seed. And I'm willing to bet that everyone out there knows the way that this is going.
Yeah, this is obviously Avengers. I do want to speak in favor of Iron Man 3. At the end of the first Iron Man, Tony says, I am Iron Man. And he owns that and he says, I am Iron Man. And Iron Man 3 is about him realizing that he is Iron Man whether or not he has the suit. And that's a cool thing for him to learn. I like that. It's a neat message. The execution is sort of muddled, I think. It's not a perfect movie by any stretch of the imagination. And having him blow up all the suits is weird because then he's got another one like 20 minutes later in Age of Ultron.
Well, it's really interesting, too, because we just talked about studio interference with Ant-Man. And I think this was a situation... I honestly do think that part of the reason that Marvel had this reactionary response to what Edgar Wright was doing with Ant-Man is because they gave Shane Black a lot of freedom to do his movie, and it is a Shane Black movie, and people say all the time
it takes place at Christmas.
It is a good Shane Black movie, but it very much does not feel as a part of this universe as the other films. Right. Now, to some people, that's a good thing. Other people, not so much. And
you have to think about it from the studio's perspective. They want all of these movies to feel cohesive, and that's really hard when you're balancing comedies and like Shakespearean dramas and space operas and all this stuff. So they're doing a crazy balancing act.
Well,
and so to have one.
The critical response to them allowing this is what, caused them to have that reactionary response to Edgar Wright and be like, no, we're not gonna let you guys have free reign. Although I will say that later on, they figured out how to do that and how to give free reign and still do something really well, and that was with Ragnarok. But
yes.
So in terms
Iron
of this
Man
match,
3, decent, but Avengers take it. We'll talk a lot about Avengers. Avengers is probably my number one movie in the MCU. Just like Cap in the classic Cap costume with, aren't the stars and stripes a little old-fashioned? Maybe we need old-fashioned. And everything about that movie. Loki is maybe my very high on the list of favorite characters in the MCU. Like him and Cap and Thor. And so Loki at full evil in this movie, and there's a moment in this movie too, and we'll talk about Avengers a lot, I think. But I wanted to
we
take
didn't
this
even
whole side of
announce
the
it,
bracket.
but Avengers does win.
Yeah.
96% of the vote. So this one was a total blowout, totally expected, I think, for most people. But yeah, like you just said, Avengers will be moving on to face Spider-Man Homecoming, and I want to get more into the Avengers next week because
we can do that.
I think, it is going to be a big discussion, and we've already talked a lot about some of these other films and what they've been doing a lot. So let's move on to our next match, and that is the number 6 seed, Captain America Civil War, against the number 11 seed, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. And I want to say really quick before Rick starts talking about this, this is the absolute perfect match, and it just worked out that the seeding is this way, because this is my favorite MCU film up against Rick's favorite MCU film, and we couldn't disagree more as to why they are our favorites.
We've literally been arguing about it for 2 weeks. Neil sent me a 20-minute voice memo about why I was wrong, which I have not listened to.
Well, here's the thing. A lot of times when Rick and I argue about stuff, really what it comes down to is...
It's the basis of our whole friendship.
Well, what it comes down to is, okay, I have my opinion because I have my perspective. I have my own sensibilities that that certain movies speak to. And he has his own sensibilities about what certain movies speak to. And this is the case with anybody. This is the case with you guys voting on these movies. But really, it's how much does this movie speak to your sensibilities? And does that overshadow or outweigh anything negative about the film? And not only that, but the negative things, are you able to either A, give them a pass, B, explain them, understand that? How much of that do you take your bias into those films? That's our preferences, right? So I guess a lot of times our argument ends up boiling down to, I understand that Guardians 2 is your favorite. I understand why it's your favorite. But stop yelling at me about Civil War because it's awesome. And that's a lot of what it turns out to be.
Maybe we should say that also Neil is a director and I'm a writer. So a lot of the times our arguments come down to theming and mise-en-scène versus plotting and logic. And so that's, I think, a part of it as well.
To me, character-wise, part of the reason I love Civil War, there's a lot of reasons, but one of the things that we always get into is the fact that, to me, this film completely captures who Captain America is. And I think the number one problem with this film is how it was marketed. And it was marketed as Civil War, as the storyline Civil War from the comics that people know. And even if they don't know it, it was marketed as Captain America versus Iron Man. And that is not what this film is about. This film is about Captain America protecting Bucky. And for people who get focused on the Sokovia Accords, they lose sight of what this movie actually is. And I think that had the marketing not focused on the Sokovia Accords and this whole civil war between the rift between the Avengers because of the Sokovia Accords, had it not been as prominent in the marketing, I don't think people would have missed what the focus of this film really needs to be, and that is Captain America being the tree, saying, no, you move, protecting his friends, standing up for the bully, standing up to the bully. For
me, especially because the Civil War comic run is one of my absolute favorites. And so I went into this with really, really high expectations. So part of it's my own fault. But like to that end, you know, if you watch this when you're thinking about the Accords being the conflict, separating the two of them, that conflict is over at the end of the second act, at the end of the fight in the airport in Leipzig. And so then there's a whole new problem, kind of. That's the third
Which I
act.
always say has always been the problem, but go on.
Right, and so like when you're looking at it from a plot perspective and not a character perspective, it's like 2 or 3 different plots that all kind of happen together at the same time, but like they're not interwoven. I don't know why I made fists. They're not interwoven.
Because they're not interwoven.
Right, exactly. They're not interwoven. They're fists. And so a big part of the problem to me was when I saw that movie, I was, okay, like I liked all the parts. And yeah, they're fighting, but like it wasn't smooth enough to me. Like, you know, if it was about one thing or the other thing or all the things, it needed to be smoother, whatever it was. And so that was kind of my big problem with it, in addition to liking the comic book so much and it being very different from the comic. I mean, obviously I was ready for it to be different. I mean, Goliath isn't in the movies, so like he wasn't going to die. But I don't know, I wasn't ready for it to be about what it was about, I think.
Yeah, I mean, we could talk about Civil War forever, and we have.
And we have.
And we can keep talking about it, but I want to jump into Guardians 2 for a moment and talk about that for a little bit, because to me, I really enjoyed the first Guardians film.
A lot
it
of
wasn't
people
my
did.
favorite, but I very much enjoyed it. I really had fun with it. I love Peter Quill. Like, I love Chris Pratt just because of Parks and Rec. And
Yes, I wish I were best friends with Chris Pratt. I wish that we were roommates. Like,
But to me, the biggest problem with Guardians 2 was that they saw what people liked about it and said, hey, let's do that, but to, 200% of what it was before. And part of what made it good to me was that they held back on it. And what I'm talking about is the comedy. The comedy of Guardians 2 completely takes me out of that film. When you have Drax making these poop jokes and it was from the moment the film started, they were constantly making jokes that were not landing for me. None of them were landing.
That's kind of how I feel about some of Ragnarok, which we'll talk about in a minute. But I totally get what you're saying. And Neil said it was my favorite of the MCU. It's not. It's probably in my top 4 or 5. I've related to Peter Quill since Jump Street. I really like just the integration of the music, and I like his character. There's a lot of irreverent characters in the in the MCU, and I relate to that. I am rather irreverent about a lot of things. I can be a bit of a jackass, and so I love Peter Quill, and I really love this movie. And I'm a pretty easy crier in movies. I teared up. I teared up in the first Guardians when he says, "We are Groot." I teared up in Infinity War because of Spider-Man, and if you've seen it, you know what I'm talking about. I teared up in the first Avenger when Cap is "Hey, I'll see you soon. We got that dance. You said we were gonna dance," and so I cry pretty easily. But I wept in Volume 2, from the whole third act, everything with Yondu. And there's that shot of Sean Gunn looking out the window.
Yeah,
that got me. So
the Yondu stuff, and this is the thing. This is why I don't hate Guardians 2, but I said earlier, it's a matter of how much good, how much bad, how do they overshadow one another. And to me, there is a lot of great stuff in Guardians 2, and primarily that is Peter Quill's storyline with his father.
Yeah,
and all
the
of
acting,
that, and just that whole storyline, especially with Yondu at the end, I'm Mary Poppins, y'all! All of that is just so good, and emotionally, it touches you so much. You have to be a rock to not be emotionally moved by that. but
And part of it was like I was kind of, I wouldn't say I was I had depression when that movie came out, but it was really cathartic for me to go to the movie theater and just cry at this movie. And so it's always I hold it in higher esteem than maybe it deserves because of just how much it meant to me when I watched it in that time. So I love it, but I'm not going to hold it against anyone who's like, oh, well, it's not perfect. It's not my favorite. Well, it's not perfect. I can't pretend that it is.
I think for me, in my first, because all of the moments of MCU that you talked about that you teared up or you cried during, like,
right.
I agree with every single, like I did in all of those moments
We're both
as well.
criers.
And I think the first time I saw Guardians, like, I teared up at the end too, or Guardians 2, I teared up at the end, but I think that the biggest problem to me was that this excess that I was talking about that they saw that did well in the first one, that they just did too much of.
They kind of doubled down on it.
Yeah, they doubled down, and that ruined those moments because all of that failed comedy, like, and then in addition to that, the whole idea of, like, the soundtrack idea, like, the music in the first one was so great and so iconic to that movie, like, that
Did you not like the music in the second one as much?
I liked the music in the second one, but I felt that they stopped caring about the actual movie and just wanted to, like, hey, where's a good spot that we can put in a good song? Like, that became, like, to me, it took me out of the movie because I honestly felt like they were doing that in the film. Like, over and over and over again, they were like, okay, let's just put in a song here, like, because there's nothing else to do. And the end...
Like, the use of the chain in that movie, it works so well because they use it twice, once when they're breaking up and then once when they're coming back together. My favorite sequence of 2017 is the Jay and the Americans Come a Little Bit Closer, where Yondu is just killing everyone. I get so much joy out of that sequence that
here's the thing, like, the first time I saw it in the theater, I think a lot of the comedy, like, it wasn't hitting me, but I was buying the movie. And then when you had the ending with Yondu and with Peter and all of that stuff going on, that emotional part, like, I was totally buying into it. And then I started getting pulled out because I felt that the entire ending of that film was literally one long music video with the same song. Like, they played the entire song, and it was, you didn't have characters really talking. Like, it was literally just a music video for that song. And
for father and son?
Yes.
I love that part so much.
I felt like they were just purposely, like, being like, hey, we want this song to be a big part of this, so we're just going to do, like, let's find random footage. Like, let's just fill up the screen with as much footage as we can so that it runs the entire runtime of the song. Rather than being like...
I think, like, that part was the crescendo of that whole sequence to me. It all leads up to Peter learning that, you know, you don't have to be a father to be someone's dad.
Okay,
and, like, he's like, now I have this relationship with Groot.
I understand that, but to me...
That's fine to you. You can just be wrong.
To me, it felt like there was at the halfway point of the song, I was like, all right, I get it. Like, I get exactly what they're trying to say. Like, the song doesn't need to keep going. And the footage, like, the B-roll, because that's literally what it was. It was no longer a movie. It was B-roll to a song. The B-roll that was playing was not needed. Like, we already got what they were trying to say and what they were showing us, like, 2 minutes ago, and it just kept going. And I remember sitting in the theater after enjoying all of that emotional part, and during that whole thing, I was like, okay, let's wrap it up. And that soured my first watch. And then every subsequent viewing, the comedy aspect of it just ruined it even more. So, when I look at this match of Civil War versus Guardians 2, to me it's a no-brainer. But I know that there are so many people out there that Guardians 2 resonates more than any other film. And it may not be Rick's top. It may be in his top 5.
But it's higher than Civil War is.
Yeah, which that's his opinion, and I don't understand it, and I can't understand how Guardians 2 would be able to move on.
Did Guardians 2 move on?
And it doesn't.
You
Civil
jerk.
War takes it 59% of the
Such an
vote.
ass.
This was, I think, our closest one in the bracket. You know, to be honest, a lot of these matches weren't as close as I thought they would in this first round. This
So wait,
one
what was
our
the
closest.
percentages? I missed it. Sorry.
Civil War was 59%.
Wow. Yeah. So that's pretty close. I mean, honestly, if I'm being totally objective, Civil War is probably better. But Guardians 2 resonated with me more, and so I voted for it. And I'm sad not to see it move on. But you know what? I love Cap. Obviously, Civil War is good. I don't have a problem with it moving on instead. You know, like I said, all these movies are so good that I'm not going to be really disappointed by. There's very few things that could happen in this bracket that would actually disappoint me.
Yeah, so
But Guardians 2 moves on.
No, Civil War moves on.
Or Civil War moves on, excuse me. I said
and
that.
that means that it will be facing the winner of our next match. And this next match, we have Thor Ragnarok, which is a 3 seed, against Captain America: The First Avenger, which is a 14 seed. And in this case, you know, going up against, in the next round, whoever wins this match, you know, going up against Civil War, like, either of these two, like, I would be okay with moving on to the next round.
Sure.
Because I love both of these films.
Yeah.
But Ragnarok, to me, I love a lot more. And it, to me, is the clear winner of this match.
Sure. I have a really hard time with this match because the Thor trilogy, the Thor and the Cap trilogies I love them both. I'm not a big reader of Thor in the comics, but I love what they did in the movies, and I love Loki. And this movie, it's so good. I do have some problems with Ragnarok. A lot of what Neil was saying about the comedy of the Guardians of the Galaxy is problems for me with Ragnarok. And it's just stuff like, I love Korg, everybody else.
Before
But,
you continue, like, the comedy that you have a problem with is that is the bathos. I think the jokes probably land for you.
They
but
do.
They don't make sense in the situation. Whereas to me, none of the jokes landed even for me in Guardians 2.
That's fair. But like, as an example of something I did like, when, you know, Thor is in the cell and Loki shows up and Korg shows up and goes, "Piss off, ghost!" I thought that was funny.
He's gone. He kicks the wall.
Yeah, that's funny. At the end of the movie, though, when they're watching Sator destroy Asgard, and he's like, we will rebuild, the foundation is strong. We'll rebuild it, and it will be a land for... no, foundation's gone now. It's destroyed. Like, that joke is funny, but I felt like it undercut the moment. And Neil and I have argued about this a lot, and you can decide for yourself whether or not you think it undercuts that moment. But in my opinion, I wish they could have just sat with it a little bit longer, and then you know, moved on. Because like Ragnarok is supposed to be this big thing, and it was. I would have liked to see Ragnarok be this big thing and sort of have the characters give it more of a sense of awe and respect as it happens. And I thought that was undercut a little bit. But to say, I still loved Ragnarok. Like, the music is great. We were talking about actors at their most actoriest. I feel like this is Jeff Goldblum at his most Jeff Goldblumiest.
Oh my gosh. Like, we talked
Not
about
the
yesterday
melt
about
stick.
like a character needing to have an enjoyable on-screen presence. And it's
Right.
like, the other day I watched Ragnarok, and immediately afterwards I was like, I'm going to watch Jurassic Park. Because because Jeff Goldblum is like, oh.
He's so good. He just interrupted me. That's not a melt-worthy offense. Oh,
so,
sparkles.
Like, just the little things that he does. Like, when he's in his chair and he's like, oh, I gotta go closer to this. Moving closer. And he's, like, sitting there, like, snapping his finger as he's moving, like, tapping his foot. Like, it's just, like, little things like that. It's just so perfect.
I can't imagine Taika's direction to him was anything else than just do exactly what you want to do. Do what feels natural.
Yeah. Well, and so... Going back to what you were saying about the ending and how you felt that the comedy undercut the seriousness of the situation, sure. I feel like that is most people's problem with Ragnarok, but
which isn't a big problem. It's really not. I still give it like an A, just not an A+.
Really, and Rick and I have disagreed about this a lot, but I feel like the MCU does that a lot. And
yeah,
in most situations, he doesn't think it's as bad.
Right.
Like it's not as serious of an offense, but I think one of the things about this film is it very much is a comedy, and if you don't accept it as a comedy, you're going to have problems with it. And then going into Infinity War, which is literally the sequel to Ragnarok.
Minutes later, yeah.
Yeah. When you go into Infinity War, and spoiler alert if you haven't watched Infinity War yet, because I'm about to talk about a scene, but that scene with Thor and Rocket.
Oh my gosh, that was the best moment of the whole
like,
movie.
Everyone's gone, and he's trying to mask his pain with humor and tough
to
guyism.
Rocket, who's the king of that. Like, it's
like, and the tears are falling down his face. Like, to me, it made anyone's complaints about Ragnarok being undercutting like serious moments. Like, it made it completely reconciled it, because to me it was like,
and it does
this
a lot,
is why
honestly.
the comedy is there, because that is Thor's way of hiding the pain that he actually feels inside, the responsibility that he feels that he has,
which is great.
Further through his journey and the worse things get for him, the more funny he becomes, because that's his way of masking it.
Because he doesn't know what else to do. And like, you know, if you think about it too, Ragnarok is one crazy thing happening from the moment his dad dies. He doesn't get a moment to breathe.
Yeah.
Up until that scene in Infinity War is really the first time he has to kind of process everything. And it makes perfect sense. But so anyway, I like Ragnarok a lot.
And then there's the whole idea that Asgard is not a place, it's a people.
It's a people.
Like,
but half of those people were just, you know.
First Avenger, going up against the Ragnarok.
First Avenger. So this is one of like what I would think of as like the golden three: the first Cap movie, the first Iron Man movie, the first Thor movie. I love this movie. I love everything about it, from skinny Cap to his refrain of "I could do this all day," which shows up at several points in Cap's movies. Yeah. To like the Howling Commandos, which I wish we could see more of. To Bucky. I'm with you. Yeah. Oh, that's what you just said to the end of it. Like everything about this movie, I love, and so I have a really hard time choosing, because if Ragnarok is an A, to me, the first Cap is an A+, and it surprises me that it's such a low seed. And I think part of the reason is, it's one of the older ones. It's a little bit camp.
It's a little campy, and the MCU is still trying to find their footing in their style and their tone and everything.
And like it's a little we've got Hydra, we've got double Nazis. It's kind of campy.
The thing that makes this movie so good, that's the thing, is the plot is a little out there. Ragnarok's plot is a little out there too, but it all fits. And the first Avenger film kind of feels like it's trying to be a serious thing with kind of a ridiculous plot, which is what comic books are. And if you buy into that notion, like, you're okay with it. But the thing that makes First Avenger work so well to me is that they, from like out of the gate, they get the character of Captain America, of Steve Rogers,
so
correctly.
It just, the moment where he dives on the grenade.
Yes.
Was this a test? Like, spot on, pitch perfect. And there's a couple other things this movie does really well, in addition to nailing the character of Cap. And it's like nailing sort of the collective feeling of the time. Like when the Nazi throws the kid in the water and Cap stops to save him, and he's like, "Kid's swimming." He's like, "I can swim. Go get him." It's like, that is America right there. It's, no, I got this. You take care of what you need to do. Yeah. And it works so well. And then also, it's one of my favorite lines about Nazi Germany. When Cap is talking to Dr. not Selvig, that's the other one, the one that makes him, Stanley Tucci, and he says, a lot of people forget the first country the Nazis invaded was their own. Like, that's so true and so brilliant. And then I love that that's tied, at least in my opinion, it's tied in later, because in Avengers, when Cap shows up in Germany to stop Loki.
Oh my gosh, that's so good.
A 70-year-old man stands up and says, he says, Neil, he says, not to men like you. And like, he's like, there are no men like me. He says,
there are always
men like you. And it's
Cap
an elderly man in Germany saying...
Yeah. And Cap shows up and says, the last time I was in Germany, there was someone who tried to,
standing above everyone else.
We disagreed a little.
We ended up disagreeing. Yeah. Like, it's absolutely, it's so good. And so those two lines... the one from Avengers and that one from the first Cap, they work so well to be like, making it clear who the bad guy. It just
Well, and the other thing is, I think this movie gets better in hindsight. When it first came out, it was not one of my favorite, but the more you become familiar with the character of Captain America, and the more you see his story and how, like, who he is and how he's been tested in all these different situations, the more you get that in all these other movies, when you go back and watch First Avenger, it's a lot more powerful than I think it was the first time around that I saw it.
100%.
So,
and
I think the 14 seed is because for the most part, those critic scores are
from that time.
They're not looking at it with the benefit of hindsight, which isn't bad. Like, they're looking at it more as a standalone thing. But I think that's why it has a hard time going up against Ragnarok.
And another thing that's cool, if I can say one more thing about the character of Cap, we were comparing Cap and Tony a lot because, that comparison invites itself. Tony's character has changed a lot. He finds out they're double dealing. He has to stop it. Like, Tony learns new things and changes as he learns these things. The character of Captain America is the exact same as it was from, like, when he shows up in Infinity War. He's the same as he was when he was that kid getting the crap kicked out of him in an alley in Brooklyn. And, like, that's what's so great about him to me.
And that goes back to what I was saying the other day about changing motivation. Like, a lot of times people think that, like, a character has to change dramatically in order for it to be a good movie or a good character arc. And I don't agree with that necessarily. I think that they have to be tested, but they don't necessarily have to change. We do need to test them well enough that we really get a handle on what they are. And we could discuss a lot more about Iron Man and how I don't think he has actually really changed despite changing. Because like we can talk about that when we get into the first Iron Man film in a couple matches. But I just so you guys know, Ragnarok does win this one, 77% of the vote.
Wow.
Moving on to face the winner of our last match, which was Civil War. So,
that'll be tough. That's two very different movies.
And
I think I could give it to Ragnarok, honestly.
It might be a 6 seed versus a 3 seed, but to me, this is literally my 1 seed versus my 2 seed.
Right.
So that will be very tough for me. I'm sad to see a First Avenger get left behind, but when you're looking at these films, like we said before, it makes sense that Ragnarok moves on.
Yeah, that it does make sense. I think I got to give it to Ragnarok in the upcoming round. But we'll have to see. I don't know. That's going to be a hard one for sure.
Yeah, it will. So we're going to jump into our next match. We got our last 2 matches. And our next one is a big one.
Yes.
What some of you guys may have been waiting for over an hour, or maybe an hour, or however long this video has been at this point.
Sorry. Not really.
The number 7 seed, Guardians of the Galaxy, versus the number 10 seed, Avengers Infinity War.
All right, I don't know about you, Neil, but this one is easy for me. It's Infinity War.
Hold on, before we start talking, if you haven't seen Infinity War, spoiler alert, like spoiler warning right now, because we're not going to be able to talk about this without spoiling anything. So, if you haven't seen it, move on to the next match. But just go ahead, Rick.
Okay, so good thinking. Spoiler alert, man. To me, it's easy. Guardians of the Galaxy is great, and I love it. But man, Infinity War, it's all of the characters. It's one of the coolest things. If Phase 1 was building to Avengers, then everything over 10 years of movies, which means like 15 years with pre-production and everything, has been building to Infinity War. And I freaking loved it. It ends on a down note. It is a tragedy if we use the classic Shakespearean genre three genres. It's a tragedy. And a lot of Infinity War and a lot of how much I like it is going to depend on the fourth Avengers film, which comes out next spring. But as it stands, as a more or less standalone movie, I love it. Like, it has enough humor, but not too much. It has enough of like the serious stuff, but not too much. There's Guardians in it and Cap and fighting, and the fighting is really good fighting. It's not like one of the problems I had with Ragnarok was that some of Hela's fighting was just like clearly her waving her hands around and CGIing some guys in. That was not the case in Infinity War, despite the fact that there's obviously a lot of CGI. It was much more measured, I thought. And so I think Infinity War should take it.
It wasn't as noticeable, to be sure.
Right, it wasn't, and like the characters that they were fighting had weight. Like, it wasn't just like, oh, there's hundreds of ragdoll CGI. It's like, it felt more realistic, despite the fact that they were fighting like weird alien dog creatures. What do you think?
I had some clear problems with Infinity War when I walked out of the theater, and I think a lot of people did too. And I think the reason that it's a number 10 seed is probably because this is not a standalone film in any way whatsoever. This is the second act of a 3-act film, and the first act was everything else in the MCU that you had to see before it. Like, you can't go into this.
Let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
Could you watch only the Avengers movies? If you watched Avengers and then Age of Ultron and then Infinity War,
no,
would you be able to understand it?
No. Because I know people who have and they don't.
Fair enough.
Would you be able to understand it? The plot is not that difficult. So
no, that's true.
You would be able to understand you would be able to understand the plot. But would you know who different people are on screen, what their significance is? Would you understand like why they're going here, why they're going there, why they're doing this, why they're doing that? No. You wouldn't.
Sure. And that's, I guess, like, to your point, it's not as standalone as other movies, but like a season finale of a TV show isn't standalone either. But that doesn't mean it's not the best episode of that season.
Well, and I think that's why it's not a lower seed than it is. But I think that being a 10 seed, getting an 84% on Rotten Tomatoes, is a result of the fact that this film, and I would say that less about the fact that it doesn't have a first act, that the first act is everything else. I would say that it's more about the fact that it doesn't have a third act. Because people will argue that, no, this is a complete film, and the story is about Thanos, and there's a clear beginning, middle, and end, and Thanos has a full story, and at the end, he wins. And the only reason other people don't think that this is a full movie is because the villain wins at the end, and that's why. I disagree with that completely, because that's only the case if you live in a vacuum and see this movie in a vacuum, which we don't. And you have to be aware of that.
Actually, my mom makes me live in a vacuum because I'm allergic to outside.
You have to be aware of that as a filmmaker, and as a critic, you have to take that into consideration. I don't think it's right to just look at it in a vacuum and say that about Thanos.
That we can't look at it.
When you do that, you know that this is not the end, because all of the characters that died, well, not all of them, but all the characters that dusted are coming back.
Right, and that's just, but we know that because of, we pay attention, and we know, oh, well, there's going to be and so that is a complaint of mine, not about the movie, but about of Marvel releasing their slate ahead of time. I wish that they had said,
even some of those things, like Black Panther, for example, that has not been announced, but we know that it's coming because it made
so much money.
And then Spider-Man 2, which is the only other one that there were just some tweets about Guardians 3, but
we know
that
that
wasn't
Guardians
officially announced, but everyone knew that one was coming because James Gunn had said stuff a couple months
ago.
Yeah,
because he's like, I'm writing the script, so we kind of assumed.
But Spider-Man, that was out of Marvel's hands, really, because it is a Sony shared property, and Sony wanted to come out and say that Sony's it was coming. Dumb. Like I think if Marvel had a choice, they would not have announced that.
Yeah.
But then on top of that, you also have Tom Holland, blabbing his mouth about being in it being a trilogy of films. So like, there's the fact of the matter is,
we know it's not the end.
we know it's not the end, and that makes this film incomplete. We know that the storyline, and you could say, well, yeah, these stories always connect, and it's a serial, so there's always going to be another part of the story. But this
do you remember?
This was a very clear, like, no, we're stopping halfway through the story that we are telling you right now, because this is not like there's not a clear break, and then we're going to pick up, oh, what happens next to these characters. This is like, how do they deal? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that's a good break, though. I mean, because it's not like they can make a 5-hour movie. There's, there has to be consension.
I agree. But I feel that the problem is that people said, like, I was really upset that people got online and said that this was a complete movie. Because I went into the film expecting a complete movie.
See, and I would argue that it is a complete movie. Not for the same reasons, but like, think about Back to the Future 2. Back to the Future 2 ends...
Well, I think this is a matter of
there we go.
Expectations. And we talk about this a lot. Like, we talk about this with Last Jedi all the time. But, like, when you go into the theater with certain expectations, like, it's not a good thing, right? And I tried so hard to measure my expectations for this film. I kept telling myself, nope, it's going to suck, it's going to suck, it's going to suck. I tried to tell myself that none of my theories were going to happen, that some other completely random
This is why you don't theorize. Neil likes to theorize. And I'm like, nope, don't.
Like, we should. We should be able to do that. These films want us to do that. The studios want us to do that. But the problem is when we take those expectations in, and then they don't happen, like, we can be let down. And so I was trying to tell myself, nope, none of this is going to happen, none of this is going to happen. And I didn't realize that I had two expectations that didn't happen that soured my experience. And the first one was I really did not want it to end with the snap. Like, we saw that coming a mile away based on marketing, based on what we know about the comic. And in my mind, I was just, like, telling myself, like, if they go, like, if they're not creative in how they end this, like, the snap can come in the film and then we can resolve it. But if that's how this ends, like, if they're not creative in how it ends, like, I'm going to be disappointed. And
I would have been so angry if he had everyone's, he's like, oh, I'm going to snap my fingers. If he had said if he hadn't assembled the gauntlet, if he hadn't used it, I would have been like, rib off. I would have been upset and offended at
I
if
understand
they had, like,
that, but I guess my thing was, if they do the snap,
like, what? Like, why is this different than, like, him going?
No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying if they do the snap, like, it has to resolve. Like, you know what I mean?
Well, it will resolve, but that's going to be the fallout.
But yes, it will resolve. I know that it will. But I went into this film expecting it to be one contained film that if they did the snap, it would be resolved. And it was not. Especially when they changed the title and said, it's not a part 2. This is its own thing. Like, this is Infinity War. This is the movie about the Infinity War, and it's not, you know what I mean? So,
right, but...
So there's that. Yeah. But then my other expectation that really got me upset was the fact that the Soul Stone has been this huge thing that we've been waiting for, and they've made it so mysterious, and even in this film, they made it out to be this huge, amazing thing that was so hard to get. And then even Red Skull says, like, oh, it has a heavy cost, like, lots of people have tried and failed. And to me, I thought that when he threw Gamora off, like, okay, that's the first step of whatever the challenge is to getting the Soul Stone. Because to me, that was too easy.
That's such a weird thing to get caught. I think that
it was way too easy for him to get the Soul Stone because they made it to be this big thing, and you would think that anyone crazy enough to try to gather all these Infinity Stones, like Red Skull says, like many have tried and failed, anyone crazy enough to do this is going to be willing to throw someone they love off a cliff. Like,
well, but still, like, I think that the point is he doesn't know how the Soul Stone works, and I think that that's going to be a big part of the next one.
I agree. I think that he doesn't realize that her soul is, like, probably trapped inside it or something like that. Like, I agree he doesn't know how it works. But I felt that the buildup of getting that stone was way too easy. way too easy.
I didn't mind that at all because I didn't want them to spend more time on it. I was let's keep it moving. Let's keep,
I understand that in the plot of the film, like, yeah, you can't take more time than what they did. Like, I get that, but like to me, it was like, oh, like he wakes up in the water, he has it in his hand. I was like, oh, really? That was it?
See, like, it's so funny that, like, you love Civil War but can't get over these things in Infinity War, and I, like, that's easy for me to get over in Infinity War, but, like, I get hung up on Civil War.
It's because these things were things that I went into with a certain expectation in my mind.
Which is why I refuse.
That I didn't even realize I had that expectation, but it was there because of how much they had built it up. You know what I mean? So, anyways, we've talked a lot about Infinity War, and we still got another match to get to. We didn't say anything about Guardians of the Galaxy, which is, like we said earlier, I think a much better film than the second one. I love this film. I love everything that it does. Rick, what do you think?
I loved Infinity War, or Guardians.
It's ranked higher than
It is
Infinity
ranked higher. I think I probably like Volume 2 better than the first Guardians, and just because, the villain is more interesting. Ronan is kind of one note, although I love the first one. Don't get me wrong. I think that it gets higher because it was fresh, and so you have to like Guardians 2 more to rate it higher, if that makes sense. But I still love it. I still think that Infinity War should win though, and move on, even though it's rated higher.
I understand the ranking of both of these, and I would not be surprised if Guardians actually moves on. But in this case, I think Infinity War is fresh on everyone's minds. I think for all, it sounds like I hated Infinity War. I did not hate that movie. I love that movie. There's so much about that movie that I love. But I had problems, right?
That's how I am about, like, Ragnarok.
But in this situation, I would still probably put Infinity War over, and Infinity War does end up winning 77% of the vote, so it moves on, and both Guardians films get left behind.
But, like, we have the Guardians in Infinity War, so, like, what you love about Guardians of the Galaxy, that's in Infinity War, and what you love about Iron Man...
you can say that about any of these movies.
Exactly, that's like, whatever you love about any of these movies is represented in Infinity War, with the possible exception of, like, Ant-Man. And, like, the heist element of Ant-Man,
Yeah, which we'll probably be getting in the next Avengers, Avengers 4.
Yeah, Avengers, rather.
So right. Infinity War moves on. Anything else you wanted to add about Guardians before we leave it
I don't think so. They're great. I love Chris Pratt. But, I mean, in this case, like, Avengers, it deserves to move on, definitely.
Yeah, I think this was tough. It's a tough match because as good as Guardians is... It's exactly what you just said. Infinity War has It has the Guardians of the Galaxy in it. And so it's basically going up against itself plus all of these other characters that we love. Like, and it was a massive undertaking for Infinity War. And given how complicated it was to pull something like that off.
Yeah.
And what they were able to do.
It's nuts. It
makes sense that it deserves to go to the next round. Now, it will be facing the winner of our last match in the next round, and we'll see if it can push through to the third round in the Sweet 16, because our next match is the number 2 seed, Iron Man, against the number 15 seed, Thor.
This one is... I've said this for all of them. This is really hard for me. These are the first... 2 for each of these characters, and I know, like, Thor is a 15 seed, and everyone's like, I don't know, doesn't like it for some reason. I love the first Thor. I think it's great, and I mean, I'm a big Shakespeare nerd, so, like, the sort of highfalutin language and everything that Kenneth Branagh brought to it, I loved. I know a lot of people sort of talked, like they didn't like the relationship between Thor and Jane. It's like, oh, they only knew each other 3 days. Well, like, so... It's not like either of them said that they loved the other one. They were just kind of into each other, and you've never met someone...
Although in subsequent films, they do make it seem like they are in love with each other.
True, but, like, time has gone by. Like, they're together. They're in Dark World together, and, like, they have more time together. But, like, I've certainly fallen in love in a second, and 3-4 days is more than enough time for that. So... I bought that relationship completely, and I thought it was fine and interesting, and I love the Warriors 3, and I love the character of Loki, and like this is where we meet Tom Hiddleston as Loki, in addition to all the other characters. And
you also can't dismiss the fact that Kenneth Branagh's casting of Chris Hemsworth and Tom Hiddleston, like
so
that was him. Like no one wanted to cast them. Kenneth Branagh
fought for them.
He fought for them, and without that, like so much of what we love about this entire cinematic universe is not there. And so like you cannot count Thor out because of what it did. We talk about sometimes impacts of films rather than the quality being a factor. But by the way, you got to consider. But
I still like the quality. Like there's moments in that movie that I still find chilling. Like look up the deleted scenes. One of my favorite scenes in this movie was deleted, and it happens right before Thor's coronation, which makes sense as to why they deleted it, because they want to open on the coronation and him thrusting his hammer up and the bum 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 score that fills that.
Yeah, the score is great. A lot of these early films, the scores are
so
wonderful.
Good. Yeah. But it's Thor and Loki just kind of chatting together as brothers before Loki has done anything wrong, or he's planning it, but like Thor doesn't know about it. And it's just they're just kind of gently teasing each other, and Loki says, I have looked forward to this day as long as you have. And that's because he's also messing with it. Yeah. But like it's just such a great moment. And then later when he's hanging off the edge of the Bifrost and he says like, I could have done it, Father, for you. For all of us. That moment gets me every time, and I freaking love this movie.
It is great. It is great at what it wanted to be.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things, that's part of the reason people don't like it as much, is because it was a very, like, in this early age, like, we had Iron Man, Incredible Hulk, Iron Man 2, then we get Thor.
Right.
And it's like, wait, this is different. This is cosmic. This is God's. Like, this is weird. And I think that throws a lot of people off.
Which is understandable.
But you have a film like Iron Man, which I said Thor is responsible for, like, those two actors, but Iron Man is responsible for all of this.
All of it.
That is the reason that it wins this one with 89% of the vote.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me as much as I love Thor. I mean, what Iron Man did it kicks off this whole MCU, and so that can't be understated or underrated. And as much as I love Thor, if I'm being honest, Iron Man deserves to move on. I would say that it's as good quality-wise, different style, but as good, maybe better even, but certainly, like, it's the most important movie in the MCU, because without it, there would be no MCU. Especially because Iron Man 2 started off really strong, and then The Incredible Hulk came out, and it was much more meh. Earlier we talked about movies that end with the hero fighting the same version of himself, and Hulk, first Iron Man kind of does that, but Hulk really does that. And,
and the first Iron Man was really the first time... At least in the MCU, but like...
Yeah, so it wasn't like a big deal, and then the Hulk does the same thing, and so like, Iron Man was really good, Hulk came out, and it was sort of, and they fumble on the second step, and that's an important step, and so Iron Man was so good, though, that they leaned into it, and they kept making it, and if the first Iron Man hadn't been so good and so strong, they never would have gotten to the whole rest of the MCU.
And it's important for people to remember, too, that, like, a lot of people think, all this whole MCU thing in Infinity War, all of it started with Iron Man. And it did, but the studio, even if they wanted to, like, they weren't in gear to continue this whole cinematic universe for a few years. Like, it started, you had 2008... and you had Iron Man came out, and then 2 months later or something, Incredible Hulk comes out. And this is, one of them's distributed by Paramount, one of them's distributed by Universal, but they were both produced by Marvel. And they were going off of this premise of, we want to start a cinematic universe, but we're not going to get ahead of ourselves. We're going to focus on each film that we want to do first, and they started with Iron Man, and if Iron Man's successful, and if Incredible Hulk is successful, then we can keep doing this and we can build towards this idea of an Avengers film. But if they aren't successful, then we're not going to, put all our eggs in this basket. And what Iron Man did so well is that first film, they did not focus on the idea of building this universe. They tacked that end credit scene.
Well, they have two things in
end.
there. They have the thing at the end, which is awesome, but they also have Agent Coulson, and he's talking about the Strategic Homeland Enforcement and Logistics Division.
But it was so small and so not,
inside baseball, so to speak. But at the end of that movie, he goes, "Just call us S.H.I.E.L.D." And you're like,
and if they never did anything with S.H.I.E.L.D. ever again, that was fine. It worked for the film. It wasn't like in that film you were thinking to yourself, wait, I don't know what S.H.I.E.L.D. is, so I don't understand what's going on. It works completely in the film, and then it's a stepping stone. And you have 2 or 3 years. 3 years.
Yeah.
But before they actually jump into the rest of these films, and then you get them coming.
It's really easy for us in 2018, having just watched Infinity War, to look back and say that this was inevitable. But it so wasn't inevitable.
Yeah.
This was a plan started in 2005 or so, depending upon how long pre-production took, by Kevin Feige, when they didn't own their biggest characters. If in 2002 you would ask people to name Marvel characters, they would have gotten Spider-Man, and that's it. They would have been like, Batman? Nope, not Marvel. Superman? Nope, not Marvel. Fantastic Four? Yep, that's Marvel. Well, they didn't own Spider-Man. They didn't own Fantastic Four, and they didn't own X-Men.
They still technically don't own two of those things. Really, they've only acquired Spider-Man.
And only kind of. And so they had to build this movie universe that they wanted to build with what were at the time considered their B team.
Yeah.
Like, nobody knew who Iron Man was.
No.
And now he's like everybody's favorite.
Yeah. And it was really this kind of idea that, like, all right, Dark Knight is out in theaters. The Dark Knight trilogy is a huge hit, or the first two films at least are a huge hit. What is most relatable to people? Tony Stark. He's basically like a Bruce Wayne type character.
I hate that comparison so much.
No.
He's not like Bruce Wayne at all.
Well, no. But to most audiences, when they see him, they recognize him as feeling similar to the kind of superhero that Batman is. And so it's easy for them to use that as their way to bridge us into this new world. And they basically said, all right, this one's more accessible to people. So we're going to start with Iron Man. People know Hulk more, so we'll do Hulk. We'll see if those two films work. And if they work, then we'll dive into Captain America and Thor, and then eventually an Avengers film.
Yeah, and it's like, they sprinkle in just a little bit in that first Iron Man, where you're looking back and you're like, oh, look, they're laying the groundwork. And they were laying the groundwork, but they didn't have to. If they hadn't worked, that S.H.I.E.L.D. reference, and casting Sam Jackson as Nick Fury is awesome. And him walking into the house and like, I need to talk to you about the Avengers Initiative. It was awesome. And then, keep in mind, the Hulk movie came out a little while later, and it ends, the tag, the end of that movie.
But that one was shot.
Tony walking in.
But that was shot way after the fact.
Was it? I didn't realize that.
Yeah, that I believe, if I'm not mistaken, was shot after Iron Man came out.
That was the first time that they had crossed over.
Remember, Hulk was it was a film mired in production problems with people wanting it to be this kind of film or this kind of film. Edward Norton wanted to make it this, and Louis Leterrier wanted to do this, and the studio wanted to do this. So this was a film that didn't know where it was going throughout its production.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until Iron Man came out a couple months earlier that they said, hey, this idea that we had for a cinematic universe, it could actually happen. Let's shoot a scene with Tony Stark and
do you always wear such nice suits?
Yeah.
Simple, effective, awesome. And then, like, I remember seeing it in the theater, and that blew my mind. I was like, Tony Stark was in this, and that was
then in Iron Man 2 they lay heavy into this connectivity, and it was a little too much, I think, for a lot of people.
Yeah,
and
with
then
Natasha Romanoff.
And so I think when you hit the Avengers, the first Avengers film, that's when they were still stumbling over their feet a little bit, and I think that was when they kind of were like, all right, we're figuring out what we're doing here. And then you still had a couple stumbles, but by now they're a well-oiled machine.
Yeah.
And it's all thanks to Iron Man and what Iron Man did as a stand-alone film, not as a part of a universe,
but it also kicks it off.
Else.
So
yes,
like,
but it succeeded. The reason it all got kicked off is because it succeeded on its own. And
sure,
and I think
then the Avengers
that's the
movies,
reason that this
they're
one
never
goes
going to
on.
be able to stand alone the way that, like, you know, Iron Man
Yeah.
can. They're sequels within sequels, and so that's not a problem to me. But Iron Man deserves to move on. Absolutely, it's going to go up against Infinity War. To me, that's a really tough one.
That is a huge
it's the
one.
most
Yes.
recent versus the original.
Yeah.
Honestly, I could see either of them winning. Personally, I think it goes to Infinity War for the same reason that, you know, Guardians of the Galaxy lost. Oh, you like Guardians? They're in Infinity War. Oh, you like Iron Man? He's in Infinity War.
Yeah.
You know, Infinity War is like a sampler platter. Everything that you like is in there. Maybe if you only like one thing, you want only that one thing. But if you like it all, and I like it all, a little flavor of everything is awesome.
Well,
so,
it's funny because in our non MCU Marvel bracket, our first match for next round is Logan against the original X-Men, which is the bookends of Hugh Jackman as Wolverine.
Yeah.
This is essentially, it's not necessarily the bookends, but this is the culmination of everything that's come before and the most recent versus
and the one that started it all.
The one that started it all. So it's a very similar type of thing, and you can see, like, obviously more recent ones, they resonate more because we remember them better.
Right.
But also these films are good films. So we're gonna have an exciting round 2, and I'm scared because I'm scared of certain movies getting knocked out in the next round. But
he's talking about Civil War.
But that's on you guys. That's gonna be up
you guys
to
have to vote.
It. So
If there's one of these movies that you really want to go forward, you got to vote for it and tell your friends to vote for it.
Yes.
Although they should think for themselves. They shouldn't just do what you want. The link's going to be below. Do it, man. Vote, subscribe, hit the bell, find us on Instagram and Twitter.
So make sure you're sharing this with other people so that we can get more and more points of view, because when we start getting down to some of these tougher matches, we're going to want as many people weighing in as possible, and we also want you guys commenting and letting us know what you think of how we feel about these films.
Right. If you're like, oh, you guys are idiots for liking Thor, tell us that. We'll cry a little, but tell us anyway. Shut up. We can both cry, Neil.
So that's going to be it for our MCU breakdown.
Yeah, these are the best movies in the round 1. And that is everything. With this video now, we've covered all of the round 1 matches, all of the winners of the round 1 matches. So the next time we see you guys talking about our comic book movie bracket, we will be moving on to round 2 and talking about who has won. So make sure you get out and vote and share and comment and subscribe, hit the notifications bell, be a part of our community, be a part of this discussion. We're really excited to be doing this. We want you to be excited too. Help us figure out the best comic book movie ever so we can definitively say this is the best comic book movie, and that is a fact.